is up, wrestling fans? This is Kayfabe Chronicles, and I am your host, JP. Well, we have returned from our little break in regards to all the wonderful, juicy knowledge that I filled you in regards to The Undertaker and his legendary streak. Oh, the highs, the lows, and all of the American badass in between. So now we enter the part that most people would most likely remember. You know, go Attitude Era, go Ruthless Aggression, go PG era. Anyways, this is part 2 of the history of The Undertaker's streak. WrestleMania 19 is a true hidden gem in the WrestleMania library, and with good reason. A solid card headlined with Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels burning down the house of Chris Jericho, Booker T losing to Triple H because at the last minute Trips decided he wanted to take his ball and go home because him beating Booker T was best for business in his opinion. But the real crown jewel on this Sunday was The Undertaker, having him in a wonderful tag team match, teaming up with Nathan Jones to take on the Big Show and Albert. At least that was supposed to be the match, and this isn't even the powers that be decision that creates confusion at the last minute. It was definitely the right call. Now, to explain this a little bit better, we need to ask the question, who the f*** is Nathan Jones? Seriously, no one really knows, to be honest, but I'm gonna try my best from what I can see. His shtick was that he was a former prison inmate that was now free. You know, kind of like Nails. Only Nails at least had a storyline that made him interesting. And also the fact that Nails choked out Vince McMahon literally and physically for more money, but hey, we all make mistakes. Anyways, Nathan Jones. Yeah, criminal. Whatever. Anyways, that's all I can really say about him. Why? Because he never freaking wrestled. They spent all this time showing vignettes of him leading up to WrestleMania, and then the night of the event, he didn't even fight. Why? Because he was even worse than Giant Gonzalez. That's right, WWE managed to sign a guy worse than Giant Gonzalez. Apparently he was training to get ready for the match, but sadly when the night came, he still wasn't up to snuff to carry on the match and make it look believable. So they wrote him out so he wouldn't embarrass himself and everyone else in the vicinity of him. After the event, he was sent down to OVW to train and work on his in-ring skills, but sadly, nothing really improved. Even after he was put on Brock Lesnar's Survivor Series team later that year, he was still garbage. Anyways, Undertaker went on his way, defeated Big Show and Albert, but sadly the match was like that of Nathan Jones' career. Sad and unfulfilling. It also didn't help that Fred Durst played Undertaker's theme song as he came down the aisle. Now, WrestleMania 20 was an epic event. WWE returned to its home in Madison Square Garden. John Cena had his WrestleMania debut, and this also featured one of the best triple threat matches that I have ever seen. But of course, according to WWE, that match does not exist. Now, Undertaker returned to his dead man gimmick because, you know, that's what people want to buy t-shirts for. And he squared off once again with his brother Kane. Now, if you saw part 1 of my History of the Streak video, then you'll know I have a raging man boner for their first WrestleMania match. So I hold some pretty lofty expectations for this one. The storyline once again was what hooked us in. Kane interfered in The Undertaker's match versus Mr. McMahon at the previous Survivor Series, costing him the match and burying the American Badass gimmick. You know, because it was a buried alive match. Anyways, the next night, Kane delivered a eulogy on how and why he buried The Undertaker. It was due to the fact that he was embarrassed of what The Undertaker had become. He was no longer a monster, but a mere mortal. Fast forward to the Royal Rumble, and Kane doing what he does best, pad his stats. The clock counted down from 10, and the eerie Undertaker gong hit. Now, The Undertaker didn't return here, but it did cause enough of a distraction for Kane to get eliminated. This would set up their match at WrestleMania 20, and it was exactly what you wanted. Old school dead man Taker, no selling, doing his creepy phenom, and to top it all up, he was once again reunited with Paul Bearer. But to be honest, or TBH for all you swag mothers out there, the match itself wasn't anything to write home about. It was nowhere near their WrestleMania 14 match, speed or move-wise, but Kane played the scared card perfectly. You believed he was legitimately scared that The Undertaker was back, and that says a lot considering it's freaking Kane. So based on character work and storytelling, I definitely got to give this match the nod. Now, WrestleMania 21 went back to actually putting a main storyline focus in regards to the match. You know, not just throwing 2 random guys in the ring and hopefully something magical will happen out of it. Randy Orton was riding high at this point of his career. He was the youngest ever world champion, a third-generation wrestler, and he was playing the legend killer role that was handed to him perfectly. The past few months he was really cashing in on it, by beating up all the old stars and legend killing it. So naturally, full of piss, vinegar, and dick hands, he took it upon himself to do what no one had ever done, and that was beat The Undertaker at Mania. Randy Orton came out guns a-blazing, utilizing his speed and youth to stick and move and dodge most of The Undertaker's offense. But cockiness would eventually get the best of him, for once The Undertaker got his hands on him, it was a beatdown. Now Randy would eventually mount a comeback, and the back and forth would continue for a majority of the match. Getting desperate, Randy would turn to his old dirty ways. Heck, even his father, recent Hall of Fame inductee Cowboy Bob Orton, came in and interfered by hitting Undertaker with his trademark cast. But that wasn't enough to keep the dead man down. Heck, even after an RKO out of nowhere, The Undertaker managed to kick out. Now, eventually, the Randiness of Orton would be his undoing, as he attempted to hit The Undertaker with his own finisher, the Tombstone. A reversal later, and The Undertaker continued on with his winning ways. Now, there's a rumor floating around that Randy was actually supposed to end the streak of this event, but him being a young up-and-comer and having mass respect for The Undertaker and his legacy, he opted out of this honor. Now, is this story true? I'm pretty sure there's at least one person out there who knows. But either way, it was a hell of a match. Now, WrestleMania 22 is truly a mixed bag. With a botched finish but still fun to hell watch women's championship match to a hardcore match of the ages with Edge and Mick Foley, WrestleMania 22 had a little something for everyone, and The Undertaker's match was no exception. Prior to Mania, The Undertaker faced Kurt Angle in a match for the World Championship, and The Undertaker was seconds away from the title when Mark Henry interfered, costing Undertaker the match and the championship. Mark Henry was in the middle of his recent mean streak persona, and was also on a huge winning streak, besting most of the biggest names in the company at that time. He was so hell-bent on ending The Undertaker's streak that he didn't even think twice to accept the challenge for a casket match at WrestleMania 22. Now, the match itself was a mixed bag. It didn't start off well, the fact that the Druids were unable to get the casket through the entrance curtain, but eventually they did. Too bad it took longer than actually a standard Undertaker WrestleMania entrance, about 2.5 hours. Anyway, the match was mostly one-sided for a good chunk. Mark Henry did pretty decent for a big guy, and we all know how big man versus Undertaker matches at WrestleMania usually stack up. Mark Henry really used his strength and power to dominate Undertaker throughout. A shining moment in this match for me was how during the entire angle, Mark Henry drilled into everybody's head that nothing scared him. And then the moment in the match when The Undertaker dodged a diving Mark Henry attack, and Henry landed into the casket, you could see a look of terror in his eyes. So, you know what? Bonus points for that. Both men continued to fight inside the casket, which did create some tension, but Mark Henry's ultimate undoing would be after hitting his patented World's Strongest Slam on The Undertaker and going for a pinfall without realizing that don't count in this kind of match. The Undertaker would hit a last ride from the second rope, followed by a tombstone to seal the deal once again. Now, I remember first watching this match when it first happened, and I was not impressed. But re-watching it for research purposes, I was so set on grading it in the category. But upon further review, based on the fact that Mark Henry was probably the best big man Undertaker had faced up to this point, speed and selling-wise, the whole No Fear storyline, and the fact that Undertaker had to hit two finishers that require him to lift his opponent over his head, and let's not forget that Mark Henry weighed over 400 pounds at this point. I have to give this match a classic rating. Now, WrestleMania 23 really isn't a Mania I choose to remember, and it doesn't help that the fact that the main event was a hair versus hair match between Vince McMahon and some other guy. You probably know his name. Anyways, whatever. Roll the clips. So yeah, WrestleMania 23, The Undertaker found himself in the world title picture in a match with then-champion Batista by successfully winning the Royal Rumble that previous January. Overall, this match, I'm not gonna lie, it didn't really do anything for me. It was pretty slow-paced. Something wasn't clicking between them. Also doesn't help that the event itself wasn't a WrestleMania that too many people consider a top contender. After it was all said and done and reading the reviews and checking the feedback, I agree with this. I think the big problem was WWE really wasn't feeling Batista as the champion. They thought it was what the crowd wanted after having him split from Evolution the year prior, and he did start off huge going out of the gate, but after doing a lot of research, I noticed that he didn't really actually defend his title a lot. Consider him an early-day Brock Lesnar. Now, leading up to this event, a lot of his pay-per-view matches were tag matches or non-title defenses. There were some decent spots. Undertaker kicked out of a Batista bomb, and Batista kicked out of a last ride, but the pacing seemed a bit off, and the crowd really wasn't into it. Perhaps it was the curse of the big man versus The Undertaker. But you know what? I can think of at least one big man that could have fixed all of this. And even though Undertaker won, thus making him the first person to win the World Heavyweight title and the WWE title at WrestleMania, different WrestleManias, because you know the brand split was as confusing as it is now as it was then. Sadly though, this match falls under the category of If you really want to talk about a long and confusing build to a main event at WrestleMania, then look no further than WrestleMania 24. The Undertaker squared off against Edge for the world title, and the circumstances leading up to this one were even more confusing than WrestleMania 13. So without further ado, it is now time for JP's mandatory, really long explanation of a WrestleMania main event. You guys remember that Undertaker beat Batista for the world title at the previous Mania, but what I didn't tell you is that the Money in the Bank winner during the event, you know, back when it was a gimmick match at WrestleMania and not a horrible, horrible pay-per-view, was Mr. Kennedy. Kennedy injured himself and lost the briefcase to Edge, who cashed his contract in to defeat The Undertaker, immediately after The Undertaker had a grueling Hell in a Cell match with Mark Henry on an episode of SmackDown. What makes this cash-in even more badass is A, Edge had only recently won the contract, and B, Edge was on Raw at the time, and The Undertaker was the SmackDown champion, so the idea of a cash-in on The Undertaker wasn't even in the cards. However, in between this time, Edge would actually lose the world title before Undertaker was able to get his rematch. Now, fast forward to Survivor Series, where Undertaker would once again get a title shot against then-champion Batista in a Hell in a Cell match. Edge would interfere and cost The Undertaker the match, and would also gain himself a title match at Armageddon the following month, in which Edge was successful in regaining the championship. The Undertaker, now hellbent to get revenge on Edge, would enter the Royal Rumble to try and secure a title shot at WrestleMania. At last, The Undertaker drew number one, and the odds were heavily against him. And sadly, he did not win that Rumble. John Cena would secure that spot by coming in as a surprise entrant by returning from injury a lot earlier than expected at number 30. Now, most likely, a lot of you are wondering, well then how the hell did The Undertaker even get the title shot if he didn't win the Royal Rumble? For you see, The Undertaker would win his title shot by winning the Elimination Chamber just before WrestleMania, to stamp his ticket to at last get his hands and revenge on Edge in the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania 24. Now, this match actually had some interesting extra factors to it. It was, of course, The Undertaker putting his streak on the line as always, but actually Edge was also undefeated at WrestleMania going into this as well. Now, granted, his undefeated streak wasn't as legendary as The Undertaker's, but The Undertaker actually had never beaten Edge prior to this. So, in reality, the odds were actually stacked heavily against The Undertaker. And it also didn't help that Edge was in some weird love storyline with Vicky Guerrero, who was also the GM of SmackDown at this point. Because, you know. Overall, the match, it was pretty slow-paced. A lot of rest holds, a lot of selling outside the ring. It wasn't what you expect from these two guys, especially during this point of their careers. I actually started to fall asleep while watching this match. Eventually things would heat up and they would start trying to hit finishers that would end in counters or powder outs. Near the end of the match though, referee Jimmy Corderos would take a huge boot to the face and would fall out of the ring. Cue the heel ways of Edge. Edge would clock The Undertaker with a TV camera and would even try to hit The Undertaker with a tombstone. Damn it, Edge, didn't you watch WrestleMania 21 and realize that that is a very stupid move? The Undertaker would counter into his own tombstone, but sadly there was no ref to count. Then out of nowhere, Little Nate himself, Charles Robinson, would run in and try to complete the free count, but alas, the time in between this was too long and Edge managed to kick out. Zack Ryder and Curt Hawkins, you know, back when they actually had TV time when they were Edge's cronies, would come down and try to interfere. But Taker would have none of that, disposing of them very easily. But this created enough time for Edge to hit the spear, but never say die, as The Undertaker John Cena'd at 2. Edge, out of frustration, tried for another spear, but this time The Undertaker would counter it into a Hell's Gate triangle chokehold to secure the win and the title. The Undertaker winning with a submission? What the f***? Like, okay, yes, this was during the time where everyone was rocking their tap-out gear and MMA was really popular amongst wrestling fans, and also doesn't help that The Undertaker himself is a huge MMA fan. Now, this match is really hard to grade. You know, it had a great storyline leading into it, and the ending was well done, but the first 3 quarters of it were very slow and very unenjoyable. Actually, a lot like an MMA fight. So, if you guys remember from part 1, I was very undecided on one of Undertaker's matches. So, you know what? I'm going to use yet another undecided vote for this one. I don't hate it, but I don't love this match, so Score clock's going to stay the same. Now, if you take a poll, and like I've said many times before, most people's favorite WrestleMania is X7. But most people's favorite WrestleMania match, most people's favorite match of all time is Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25, and with good reason. The build-up to this was so simple, but yet ridiculously profound. Shawn had pretty much coined the phrase Mr. WrestleMania throughout his career, and with good reason. Yes, his win-loss record at Mania isn't amazing as Undertaker's, but you gotta give the man credit. His matches are always classic, and pretty close to, if not being the match of the night on the grand stage. So with all this being said, he just flat-out challenged The Undertaker to a match due to the fact that The Undertaker was undefeated. That's it. No interference costing someone a title, no hatred for the dead man, no Royal Rumble shenanigans, no beyond insane storyline that involves 6 people. It was simply one man wanting an opportunity to break the streak. Now, once the match was set, though, they did bring an in-depth storyline that really didn't need to be involved, but whatever, it gave the writers something to do. Michaels, who is now a recent born-again Christian, was really pushing the whole man of faith. Living a heaven on earth storyline, and no, I'm not going to go into detail about that time Vince challenged Shawn to a match where God was supposed to be the tag team partner. Anyways, with The Undertaker being the dead man and a creature from hell, it made total sense they would play, if you want to go to heaven, first you gotta open up the gates of hell and beat me kind of angle. Because, woot religion in wrestling! It always works. Just ask Reverend Devon, Deacon Batista, Friar Ferguson, Mordecai. Anyways, the match itself, I have no words to explain this besides absolute perfection. If you were to take a shot every time there was a false finish, a countered finisher, someone kicking out of a finisher, you'd be beyond wrecked, and not in the Ralph sort of way. Seriously, this is a match where the last ride, the tombstone, sweet chin music were all kicked out of, and the Hell's Gate got broken up by a rope break. I have no idea how these two guys were even able to stand and deliver blows 30 minutes plus into this match. You want to experience emotion and storytelling in wrestling? Then watch this freaking match. Both guys gave 200% from the first bell all the way to the last. If there was ever a perfect match at Mania, this is it. All the way to when Undertaker caught Shawn Michaels midair doing a moonsault and landed one last tombstone to seal the deal once again. So with that, we're going to end part 2 on a high note. Let's take a look at the score clock. Now, even with the neutral votes, you can see that the later part of The Undertaker's WrestleMania career is a hell of a lot better than the previous. We now stack up with 8 classic matches compared to the 7 pieces of dog. Now, how does the last part of The Undertaker's WrestleMania career look? You're just going to have to find out for part 3. As always, if you guys like what you saw, please crush that like button, hit subscribe, and click the bell notification for whenever we post videos. This is JP from Kayfabe Chronicles, and I will see you guys next time.